Hello, I'm Claire and welcome to my video blog. Now I'm doing a series on the Brexit referendum, and things are getting pretty hot now, and they're getting pretty warmed up, and this is all to do with this unfortunate episode. It's bad enough that somebody might get murdered under strange circumstances by someone who's mentally unstable, and this has obviously all been blown into a completely different direction entirely by the Remain camp, who have acted in an absolutely shameful and disgraceful way, as far as I'm concerned. There's been all this they don't seem to have directly focused on his bizarre statement in court on Saturday, but I'm very happy to see that people are calling them out on it. Today, Will Straw, the son of the famous Jack Straw, the politician, cabinet minister under Tony Blair, who was one of the elected officials of Leeds Student Union, Leeds University Student Union, I should say, which is the same university I went to some years after he left. So we have a close association about Jack Straw around here, and I was very pleased to see how quickly somebody called out his atrocious statement that, in the light of in the view of the murder having taken place, they should accuse the Leave camp of stirring division and resentment, and then claiming the ground that it was their camp which represented a decent, tolerant UK, and the way that the Leave camp has been vilified and slurs made at us as a result of this is absolutely disgraceful and hypocritical. It's all about virtue signalling, what they do. I went up to, I was in Headingley this afternoon for a short while, and on my round a few little items, one of them was I popped into the local community centre, and there was a couple of people sitting at a table, and I put half a dozen leaflets down on the table, and I said, oh, do you mind if I just put a few of these down? And then they gave them back. This woman who looks remarkably like Lauren Penny, I think it is, she picked these back up and she said, oh, we won't want these because we haven't got the other side. And I thought this was just a typical limiting behaviour coming from a social justice warrior who was trying to control and shut down any information or debate because of some kind of ludicrous notion of social justice that, you know, because if, as far as I'm concerned, if the Remain camp want to go and put some leaflets there as well, as long as it's not a problem with the management, if the management come along and see them and they don't like them, then they can throw them away, you know. So I'm you know, for freedom of expression on this. And what really worries me more than anything else, well, the whole abyss of remaining in the EU and having Junkers and that set dictate to us what happens in the future. I mean, that's utterly terrifying, but also just at a local level, I mean, I know that will probably take a while to feed through. You know, they might not do it immediately. They might want to lull us into a false sense of security and play it out, so everybody will say, oh yes, look, you leave us, you know, you were just unnecessarily suspicious, and then later down the line it'll be crept up on us. But in the meantime, it's happening anyway because of the whole migrant invasion crisis and the EU denial of that. So you know, that aspect of it's already happening. Other aspects would happen further down the line. But what would be the most immediate? What would be the most immediate effect? Was we would have to put up with the absolute smug, absolutely smug and supercilious attitude that we would almost certainly get from the Remain camp if we did remain, if the vote happened that way, if it was fixed. And certainly speaking for myself and probably a lot of others that I know in terms of the Leave camp, we would all just be so joyful to be out of the EU, to have voted to get out of the EU and to have a proper majority. And, you know, I know there's going to be obstacles, you know, people will stop it trying to stop it happening, but if we can get that majority, then it's assured, as far as I'm concerned, and we will be determined to push this through. But so if we get that, I will just be so joyful. I won't be wanting to sneer or put down the people who have tried to steal this from us by all sorts of means, not least of which is hypocritical exploitation of tragedy. And I would just be so joyful. I wouldn't have any need to say anything nasty to anybody. I would just say, I'm very glad it's all over. I'm just very glad it's all over. Now maybe we can sort things out. But I know that if the Remain camp win, it is just going to be absolutely horrible. They are going to crow over us so much that I simply can't bear the thought of it. So we absolutely just have to have a greater vote than these hypocrites, these sneering, oh dear me, I cannot think the words for it. They seem to be lulled into some kind of hypnotic trance, going down this road towards the Pied Piper of international corporate servitude. I spoke to the manager of a whole food shop that I visit locally, and I shall doubtless continue going there because it's a good shop. But these people seem to have, some people seem to have some strange notions. He said, well, TTIP, which is this trading agreement that the EU wants to basically give away everything to the corporate interests in terms of legal rights and stuff. He said, oh well, we'd be far more likely to be able to resist having TTIP imposed on us if we were in the EU than if we were independent. And I thought this is just utterly ludicrous statement, because every single piece of information that I have come across about the TTIP is that it's the EU that's pushing it really hard. It will play us into the basically complete ownership by the corporate, you know, institutions. I mean, Goldman Sachs is one of the largest, I believe it may be one of the principal funders of the Remain campaign. Surely that should tell anybody, what this is about. This is about the people who are already in the elite, feathering their nests. Oh yes, and to get back to the reason why I went to Headingley this afternoon was that I found out at the last moment as I got there that I was going to see a talk by Eddie Izzard, who is an infamous Remain campaigner, and he was going to be speaking at the local community centre. So I wanted to get there and pose some questions. But anyway, he had decided that he was going to stop He wasn't going to speak today because in respect for the poor woman who was murdered last week, which was last Thursday, we've had Friday and the weekend. This is a very important decision. We shouldn't stop simply because a tragedy has happened which has nothing really to do with it. I mean, this chap basically, if he really was mentally unstable and violent, then he could have hit anybody, really, couldn't he? And apparently he was actually asking for help the day before, and he was turned away from his doctor's surgery because they didn't have anything to offer. So if we had better mental health services, none of this would have happened. So I just did rather think that it was terribly virtue signalling on the part of Eddie Izzard to stand down today. I realised that probably what this might have had to do with was that there does seem to have been quite a lot of resistance to all this virtue signalling and how we have to, submit to the Remain camp because, the kind of thing that Will Straw's acolytes have been inflicting on the population with their accusations of stirring division and resentment. So I think that he might have stood down today, partly because I think that people were ready to, I certainly was ready to get back in the fray, and I haven't watched some of these things like Cameron on a Question Time, but people have said to me that he kind of melted down and that it would look appalling. He looked appalling, and I don't know whether this is just the echo chamber of my own, links and associates. But one of the things these people like to do, the cultural Marxists, is if they feel they're losing the debate or people are realising what's going on, they're being sussed, as we used to say back in the 70s, then that's what they like to do. Shut it down. Shut it down. Even if they have to shut down their own speech, they want the subject shut down. So I think that Eddie Izzard carrying this on through virtue signalling, it's all like, oh, this was such a terrible thing, we can't talk about it now. Oh yes, and there's a petition, apparently, some kind of petition being made to stop the referendum happening because of this. It's got completely out of control. All this, it's all virtue signalling. It's all these people trying to claim some kind of moral superiority against the people who just want to say, look, this was a terrible thing to happen, but in the greater scheme of things, we have to make our own minds up about a much, much, much larger issue that will affect the future of our nation and our people forever, and not be distracted by one thing that people are trying to play out of proportion. It's absolutely atrocious. So I know what they're doing. They're deliberately playing, whether it was, as I suggested previously in a previous video, it looks a bit suspicious to me. But even if it was only entirely some kind of nutcase, although I do have to ask, how the hell did the SPLC in the south of the United States get, within a few hours of this happening, receipts of some kind of book that he supposedly bought nearly 20 years ago, or 18 years ago, or something like this? Utterly ludicrous. That in itself is something that makes me suspicious. And if they hadn't, if it had just been a case of the fact that, well, he had a bit of, a gun or some kind of, material at home or something, then fair enough. But this SPLC thing just really makes me suspicious. But anyway, so it's, even if that is not the case, and it's still speculative, the whole exploitation of the virtue signalling and manipulation and the putting down and suggesting that the Leave camp have somehow morally disreputable in some way, slurred us by associating with us with this unfortunate incident. And as many of my viewers will know, cultural Marxists always lie and they always project. What they're doing here is they're projecting their own behaviour onto us, right? So they're virtue signalling, oh, I'm with this, but actually they're putting their own shadow behaviour, the stirring of division and resentment, and the prevention of a decent and tolerant UK is actually what they're doing. And as Stefan Molyneux so rightly says, I'm not virtue signalling when I say this, because it's our duty to call these people out, and this is merely self-defence. So we've had enough of this virtue signalling from these elites who want to mess around with us when we're all really, obviously everybody is really hyped up about this. This is the biggest thing. I think people are beginning to realise this is a really big thing. And obviously it's also midsummer, full moon, you know, everything's up, this is it. And then something like this happens. Oh, we can really get some trauma-based mind control on this, because people don't think rationally. They're all, oh God, you know, shit, oh what, and that's what they're trying to do. We should have just had a day or two, you know, Friday, the weekend. Okay, we'll calm down, we'll just put this aside, we'll just get back to the business on hand, right? But they know that we're all on the edge. We're all on the edge of an abyss here. And people are going, oh, should we jump? Should we, you know? Or would remaining be the jump into the abyss? You know, that's the thing, isn't it? Because I feel, well, you know, we want to step away from this thing, this Leviathan, this monster over there, this EU political construct that's teetering on the brink, doesn't know what it's doing with its migration policy, financial crisis, countries like Greece and Italy being put under administration from bureaucrats in Brussels. It's a complete nightmare, and these people are taking us in it. We remain in this nightmare, will only get worse. So that's where I'm at with it this evening, folks. Midsummer Night 2016. Please vote Leave to save our people, save the country and save the world from the descending abyss of chaos that remaining in the EU will take us to. Thanks for watching. Cabinet Minister under Tony Blair, who was one of the elected officials of Leeds Student Union, Leeds University Student Union, I should say, which is the same university I went to some years after he left. So we have a close association, and about there's been all this. They don't seem to have directly focused on his bizarre statement in court on Saturday, but I'm very happy to see that people are calling them out on it. Today, Will Straw, the son of the famous Jack Straw, the politician. Hello, I'm Claire, and welcome to my video blog. Now I'm doing a series on the Brexit referendum, and things are getting pretty hot now. They're getting pretty warmed up, and this is all to do with this unfortunate episode. It's bad enough that somebody might get to Jack Straw around here, and I was very pleased to see how quickly somebody called out his atrocious statement that, in the light of in the view of the murder having taken place, they should accuse the Leave camp of stirring division and resentment, and then claiming the murdered under strange circumstances by someone who's mentally unstable, and this has obviously all been blown into a completely different direction entirely by the Remain camp, who have acted in an absolutely shameful and disgraceful way, as far as I'm concerned.